to my channel, everyone. I know I've been gone for a little while, but I have to say I'm actually really glad that I took that break. Now, I didn't go on holidays. Life just actually got so busy that I had no way to actually keep up these videos and meet all my responsibilities doing everything else. But having that time away from this platform actually really refreshed me, and I feel like I've come back now and I have so much more to say, so much I want to say. Now, to explain the background here, I just finished filming a really special Halloween episode that I cannot wait to share with you, but I really love the way this looks. I think it's pretty cool and it kind of makes things a little bit different. And now that we're in the first week of October, I figured, why not just keep it in the background and it can be like a bit of a Halloween theme this month. Maybe I'll even get some costumes in the next video. But what I want to talk about in today's video is genre versus literary fiction. Why the debate? Now, most of you probably know the difference between genre and literary fiction, but a few weeks ago, I led a creative writing workshop day for a group of high school students, and only one student in that group actually knew the difference. Probably because they worked in a bookstore. If you're not sure, here's the deal. Genre fiction refers to books that have particular tropes. When a reader picks up a science fiction book, for example, they immediately know the types of features that book is gonna have. If I say a category like romance, thriller, fantasy, crime, you instantly have an idea in your mind of the type of story that book will be. Literary fiction is also a genre. Yeah, okay, so I know this is kind of confusing. These stories are usually realist, though they can contain tropes associated with the other genres of fiction. These types of stories, because they're realist, are usually depicting the minutiae of everyday life. As one of the high school students said during that workshop, these are the types of stories that middle-aged women read. And now look, that isn't true, but it made me laugh anyway. In fact, the opposite could actually be true, as 55% of YA readers are adult women, which is interesting in itself. Some people argue that genre fiction is driven by plot. Stuff happens, there are high stakes, whereas literary fiction is driven by character. Not that much happens and the stakes are relatively low. This black and white definition contains a seed of truth, but both genre and literary fiction, if good, should contain both internal and external conflict. That might be a future blog. The one thing every story needs is conflict. Tension is what keeps you turning the page, whether that tension comes from trying to save the world or trying to buy back the house that your deceased father left to your stepmother. That was a very specific example. Without conflict, you don't have story. You have a vignette at best, and a poetic reflection at worst. Actually, I'm not really sure that there's that big of a difference between a vignette and a poetic reflection. Anyway, the reason why I'm talking about genre and literary fiction is because, in case you aren't aware, there is a general opinion within literary criticism that genre books are bad because they are unoriginal and rely on tropes and are essentially infantile because aliens. And literary fiction is considered good because they are original, subtle, sophisticated, and intelligent. Genre books are entertainment. Literary books are art. Genre books are to be consumed, and literary books are to be studied, dissected, and pulled apart. Genre books are pure story, and literary books are metaphors that critique our political, social, environmental, cultural, education, or economic system. Of course, all of this is a total wash. Most science fiction and fantasy books explore social justice issues, and they're based on either historical facts or technological evidence or scientific evidence. Many crime novels explore issues around mortality and poetic dynamics. Romance novels can subvert, okay, or play into gender norm. And horror fiction also explores ideas around mortality, morality, religion. They can also reflect our collective fears about war, security, government, and so on. You get the idea. Genre books can be about stuff too. So why all the judgment? Are you ready for a history lesson? Part of the original stigma that is attached to genre books comes from the pulp novels that began in the early 19th century, beginning with penny dreadfuls, which then continued on into the 1930s before dying out in the 1950s. These works became popular because prior to the 18th century, books were incredibly expensive. The arrival of penny dreadfuls and later the pulp magazines of the 30s and 50s were made cheaply and distributed widely. The stories were considered lowbrow because they were so formulaic. They were called pulp fiction because they were printed on cheap paper made from wood pulp, and because you'd only read them once and then toss them away, presumably. They were written for entertainment and without much finesse. Though that point can be argued. Disclaimer included. So does this mean that pulp stories aren't valuable? Well, I suppose that comes down to your personal opinion and how you'd answer the question, why do I read and what a story's for? Pause on that for a moment. Do you read to switch off at night because you want to be entertained or because it's a way to escape the mundaneness of everyday life? Do you read to experience different ways of seeing and doing, to challenge yourself, to feel something, or to recognize yourself, to see your life reflected back to you? Maybe none of these things, or maybe all of these things at different stages and times in your life. The strange thing about genre versus literary fiction is that literary fiction is held in greater esteem within the collective literary consciousness. Or maybe just the New Yorker, though that is changing. And yet, genre fiction is the bigger seller. And look, it's so easy to dismiss or put down big sellers. Look at Twilight or 50 Shades. Those books boomed, and following that boom came a wave of criticism about how terrible both series were. They were heavily criticized because they were popular. If only 2,000 copies of Twilight were sold, would anyone care? Would there be 1,000 memes making fun of it? Or 1,000 essays about how problematic the central romance is? Unlikely. The more visible a book is, the easier it is to criticize. What is even stranger is that most readers who read wide consume both literary and genre fiction. Sorry. That fit in with the Halloween theme, actually. What is stranger still is that most readers who read widely consume both genre and literary fiction. Why? Because we all want different stories at different times and for different reasons. Sometimes we want to read a book that has been created with the intention that it be closely read, examined, dissected, and analyzed. Sometimes we want the comfort of seeing the small, familiar, domestic everydayness of our own lives reflected back to us, or because we want to witness how incredibly complicated relationships can be. Sometimes we want to experience the thrill of high stakes, characters that pop, the wonder of living through an incredibly complex problem while having absolutely no responsibility to solve it. My favorite kind of problem. More and more people are writing about the value of genre fiction, and more writers are finding ways to combine the best elements of literary fiction, a focus on language and thoughtfulness, with the best elements of genre fiction, cool stuff, in order to create hybrid texts that define the limitations of both categories. What is most exciting is that there has been a significant shift in the way that genre fiction is perceived. In recent years, there's been a newfound level of respectability about genre fiction. And part of this is because there are so many authors now that are blurring the boundaries between these two categories. Now, maybe the stigma of genre fiction will never entirely go away, but the conversation is changing. And as long as there is a market for these types of books, genre fiction isn't going anywhere. And at the end of the day, most of us have enough space on our bookshelves for both. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about the debate of literary fiction versus genre fiction? Do you read both of these categories, or do you prefer one over the other? I'd really like to hear your responses, so leave them in the comments below. Now, if you'd like even more writing advice, you can of course check out the other videos on this channel, or you can go to taraeast.com and dive into the archives. While you're there, be sure to join my email newsletter, because when you do, I'll send you a free gift and you'll receive a newsletter in your inbox every single Thursday morning containing a note by me, links to that week's blog and vlog, as well as resources that I've recently discovered and think you'll enjoy too, and other tidbits that I only share via email. Thank you so much for being here this week. It is great to be back. Yes! Now stay safe, stay calm, and keep writing, because the world actually does need more books, including spooky books.